Good morning or evening, everybody. I'm Jonathan. I'm the last speaker in this panel, but this is Hua, who's going to be moderating and hosting today, and we're both students here at CIS. And I think we should get going. We have, at this point, we have a little bit under 30 minutes for each speaker, and we'll go in the order of the schedule. And you can organize, let's say we around 20 minutes for each speaker, and if there's time in that 20 minutes for questions and answers, then that's great. Otherwise, we can each take 20 minutes, let's say, and then at the end have a discussion at large about all the topics that came up. Something like this, I think, would be a good form to work on, but we're a little late started. Okay, Stefan, it's over to you.
Oh, ready to go. Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share the screen here, if that's okay. So for those who associate Buddhism with sensory denial, the compound Buddhist music may seem like a contradiction in terms. Musical practice has more or less been considered a secondary development, an upaya, to borrow the Buddhist term, employed mainly within the confines of the Mahayana milieu to attract lay followers. Indeed, the Buddhist ideal was, from earliest times, one intended to be fulfilled primarily by renunciates, who subjected themselves in varying degrees to an ascetic discipline that would seem to imply the necessity of renouncing the appeasement of musical appetites. If the 4th century BCE writings of the Greek historian and diplomat to Mauryan India Megasthenes are any indication, such ascetics or shramana in pre-monastic times were bifurcated into forest-dwelling and city-dwelling types, the former of which would have likely never engaged directly with a formal musical performance. It is, however, almost certain that the latter group, in the midst of their urban lifestyles, would have at least come into contact with musical entertainment of one sort or another. Whatever the status of music was among these two groups of early Buddhist ascetics, by the time of their effective merging into the single category of settled practitioner via the victory of the monastic ideal, and hence the establishment of an official code of conduct for monks or Vinaya, the participation of the Buddhist priesthood in musical practices had given rise to enough conflict for it to become a highly regulated affair. Nevertheless, even after the establishment of prohibitions on singing, dancing, and instrumental music in the monastic context, chanting practices were retained and developed by the monastic establishment until the time at which song and dance forms from other religious movements were incorporated into the formal Buddhist institutions of medieval India. Today, or tonight from where I am at, I will give an account of the development of Buddhist musical practices from the earliest times to the disappearance of Buddhist institutions from India proper, demonstrating the persistence of descendant traditions in the Sanskrit esoteric Buddhist chant and song of Japan and Nepal, and in the Buddhist music theoretical treatises of Japan and Tibet. In particular, the musical theory and praxis of these three representative descendant Buddhist traditions will be shown to sonically illustrate the transition from political and social order to decentralized social organization, a shift that took place between the 7th and 13th centuries in medieval India. For all appearances, musical practices first began to be incorporated into the lay Buddhist ritual apparatus, concomitant with the rise of settled monasticism in ancient Gandhara during the Saka-Kushan period, a time frame roughly encompassing the years 1 to 300 of the Common Era. The musical practices that developed within this time frame and in this region are best attested to in two types of sources, namely Gandharan Buddhist art and the extant recensions of the Code of the Conduct for Monks, or Vinaya. Using these two sources in conjunction with each other allows us to get an idea of what early Buddhist musical practices were like. First and foremost, the artistic record of Gandhara during the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Common Era exhibits undeniable evidence of Hellenistic and more specifically Dionysian ritual practices and the subordination of those practices to the Buddhist ideal. Much of the sculpture that appears in the artistic record during this, in addition to recounting the Buddha's life story in a chronologically sequential manner for the first time in Buddhist history, displays laypersons indulging their senses in what can only be described as bacchanalian fashion, most notably through the practice of ecstatic music making and the drinking of wine. In the Hellenistic context, such imagery also implies the existence of theater, a central feature of the Dionysian cultus. That Buddhist monks and nuns, at least initially, engaged in such theatrical practices can be more or less textually confirmed by several stories in the Vinaya, many of which are connected with an annual festival that was purportedly instituted by King Bimbisara just outside of Rajagriha. These stories often mention a band of 6 monastics, sometimes monks, sometimes nuns, who participated in the festivities at Rajagriha in varying degrees. For example, in the Chinese and Tibetan versions of the Mola Sarvastivada Vinaya Bhivanga, it is said that a group of performers came to a certain monastery seeking out stories of the Buddha for the purposes of including those stories in proselytizing theatrical production. Upon being refused such instruction, the group created a comedy based on a less than flattering circumvention of the Vinaya they witnessed at the monastery. This led a band of 6 monks, one of whom was implicated in the story, to set up a competing theatrical guild which inflicted financial punishment on the professional troupe at the Rajagriha festival. Similarly, the Chinese version of the Mahasangika Lokattaravada Vinaya Bhikshuni Bhivanga tells the story of a group of 6 nuns who attended one of the purported entertainments at Rajagriha. The nuns, with their awkward social behavior, became a distraction from the professional performers, once again leading to the financial loss of the latter. Here, performers of instrumental music were defined as those who play the drums, sing, dance, play the lute, cymbals, or gongs, as well as any 4 actors coming together to perform. The descriptions in both of these stories point both to the popularity in early Buddhist theater of the comedic genre, the most prevalent form of drama during the Hellenistic period, as well as to the influence of Greco-Roman theatrical forms, which are known to have employed 4 actors rather than the traditional 3 of the Hellenistic tradition. The distance of intense trade between the Kushan and Roman domains during the time period in question is sufficient to explain the apparent use of Greco-Roman forms in early Buddhist theater, but little is known about the process by which these forms were quickly adapted to the South Asian context, except that the adaptive process culminated in the Sanskrit plays of Ashvaghosha, whose Shariputra Prakarana, the Prakarana form, is extant. Now, when it comes to early Buddhist chant, the Vinaya once again helps to clarify the question of origins. Significantly, a transliteration of the word for Vedic meter and verse, namely chanda, appears in a redactor's note to the Mola Sarvastavada Vinaya Kshudra Kavastu, translated into Chinese by the 7th century Chinese Buddhist monk Yi Jing. The context for the appearance of the word chanda is a story about a Brahmin who took Buddhist holy orders and continued to chant in the Vedic manner. Hence, a link is established between early Buddhist and Vedic chant. The Vinaya texts also imply a potential plethora of recitation techniques, as terms for recitation often appear modified by a prefix specifying style. For example, in the Pi Ni Mo Jing, a commentary on the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya, words for recitation such as song and shua are prefixed by either the word ge yin, singing sound, or gao sheng, high voice, to refer to chant. This typologically diverse notion of Buddhist recitation methodology is confirmed in a Chinese translation of the Sarvastivada Vinaya, also redacted by Yi Jing. Here, recitation is referred to by the character bei, a transliteration of the Indic pat, which itself denotes a system of context-dependent recitation techniques in the 19th chapter of the Natya Shastra, that great compendium of music and dramaturgy that assumed its final form in the Gupta period. 2 concepts from the relevant section of the Natya Shastra are of particular interest here. The first of these is the word alamkara, a word also used to describe melodic motifs in the 29th chapter of the Natya Shastra on instrumental music. In the latter case, the importance of the alamkara was emphasized by the use of simile as follows. A song without any alamkara will be like a night without the moon, a river without water, a creeper without a flower, and a woman without any ornament. The Patya alamkara, on the other hand, rather than being melodic motifs, are reminiscent of the schematates lexeos, or modes of utterance, a subtopic of the art of diction, or lexis, in Aristotle's Poetics, evidencing a typological influence from the Hellenistic tradition, but the author of the Natya Shastra goes into much more detail than does Aristotle. In the Natya Shastra, there were 6 Patya alamkara: the Ucha, high; Dipta, excited; Drutra, fast; Vilambita, slow; Mantra, grave; and Nicha, low. In addition to being distinguished by timbral and temporal considerations, each Patya alamkara corresponded to one of 3 specific vocal registers, or sthana, and to an attendant anatomical point of origin. The second theoretical category of interest from the Natyasasta's Patya system is that of Varna, a concept much more famously known from the instrumental music section of the Natyasastra, where it refers to general melodic contour. There, the four Varna were the Sthayin, straight, Avarohin, descending, Arohin, ascending, and Samcharin, meandering. In the Patya system, however, the four Varna were described in terms of the Vedic accents, or Svara. Three of the Patya Varna corresponded to the Anudatta, grave, Svarita, circumflex, and Udatta, acute accents, respectively, and the fourth Varna corresponded to the ornamental oscillations that accompanied the intonation of the Svarita, or circumflex accent, namely the Kampita. The Natyasasa's Patya system clearly bears the mark of Vedic recitation methodologies in dialogue with Hellenistic typologies, thus indicating a synthesis that could have only been initiated in Gandhara, the very seat of the Vedic canonization process long before the arrival of either Hellenism or Buddhism. Taxila in particular, as a strong center for both Vedic and Buddhist learning, was a place where Vedic chant recitation formulae and techniques may have first been applied to Buddhist texts, and this methodology may have even been incorporated into the Natyasastra at a later date. Now, evidence of the persistence throughout the classical age of the Gupta and Vakataka empires and shortly thereafter of the above-mentioned recitation techniques comes from Chinese Buddhist histories and travelogues. For example, the Gaosengjuan, or Memoirs of Eminent Monks, in its descriptions of the chanting styles of early Chinese Buddhist chant masters, includes mention of various intonational patterns, termed diao, that were used for intoning scriptures. Among these were the ping diao, level intonations, gao diao, high intonations, and shao qi tiao, little energetic intonations. Many of the intonational patterns are reminiscent of the Natyasasta's Patya Alamkara and Varna. Also, similar terms appear as annotations prefacing some of the gathas from the Dunhuang manuscripts, suggesting that these chanting techniques were prevalent in Central Asia, if not in India, during the time period in question. Finally, I Ching, the translator of the Vinayak text mentioned above in his 7th century travelogue about his journeys in India and Sri Vijaya, confirms the persistence of a prolonged chanting style in Indian Buddhist monasteries, and he refers to this style of chant with the character Bei, the transliteration of the Indic Pat encountered earlier. In terms of instrumental music, the Gaosengjuan tells us that in the West, meaning Central Asia and India, Buddhist stotra, or zan, were set to pipes and strings, or guanxian. The setting of such hymns to instrumental accompaniment throughout the Indian cultural sphere is confirmed by I Ching, who speaks in particular of the popularity throughout the Buddhist world of the hymns of Madrichetta, a Kushan period ex-Shaivite turned composer of Buddhist stotra. Importantly, I Ching's descriptions imply that these hymns, though being set to instrumental music in the wider Buddhist world, were memorized and chanted in the 7th century Indian Buddhist monastic context. This, combined with our knowledge of the Vinayak prescriptions for instrumental music in the monastic setting, suggests that this must have been the normative condition in Gupta period Indian Buddhist monasteries as well. Now, just around the time of I Ching's travels on the Indian subcontinent, however, the political and social stability previously provided by the Gupta and Vakataka empires was giving way to fragmentation and the rise of regional centers of power. In the midst of the political and social disorder characteristic of this episode in South Asian history, esoteric Buddhism emerged, in the words of Ronald Davidson, as a response to the feudalization of society. The change was rapid, such that later esoteric Buddhist practices were quite distinguished from their early esoteric Buddhist counterparts. In terms of vocal music, this meant a shift from highly regulated chant to elaborate forms of song, drawn from other religious traditions, and ultimately from the profane secular world. The early period practices were brought via Tang Dynasty China to Japan by the 9th century, and both early and late period esoteric Buddhist practices were brought to Tibet and what would become Nepal. By the time that Buddhist monasticism in India was coming to an end in the 13th century, Buddhist music theoretical traditions had begun developing in both Japan and Tibet, and the late period Indian esoteric Buddhist song forms had been incorporated into the rituals of Newari Vajracharya priests in Nepal. As such, evidence for both early and late period esoteric Buddhist musical practices abounds in these three crucial spheres. It is to an examination of that evidence that we now turn. Sanskrit Buddhist chant from the early esoteric Buddhist period has been preserved in the chant of the Japanese Shingon sect. A premier example of this is the piece Shichibongo no San, or Shichi-san, a shloka, the Sanskrit text of which is found in the Sarvatathagata Tattva Samgraha Tantra, an early yoga tantra. Significantly, the chant theory employed in this hymn is explainable not only in terms of Shingon Buddhist chant theory, but also in terms of the theory of the Natyasastra and that of the Romoi Tanchus, a treatise on music by the 13th century Tibetan scholar Sakyapandita. The parallels are extensive, but today I will focus on the intonational patterns or melodic types known as senitsuke in the Japanese tradition. The senitsuke in the Shichi-san, as in other Sanskrit Buddhist chants from Japan, are traditionally divided into four primary types: the sugu, ori, sori, and yuri, meaning the straight, descending, ascending, and meandering, respectively. In addition to paralleling the Natyasastra's Patyabharana, they were likewise paralleled in the concept of ngaro, as it appears in Sakyapandita's treatise. Also in a 16th century commentary to Sakyapandita's treatise by the Sakya sect scholar Kungasonam, each of these primary melodic types are described in terms of one of the similes used to describe melodic contour, or varna, in the 29th chapter of the Natyasastra, the aforementioned chapter on instrumental music. The correspondences are summarized in this chart that you're looking at right now. One of these similes appears in the 15th century Shojitsu-sho, a theoretical treatise in the Shingon tradition, in its description of the yurisori, a melodic type used in the Shichi-san. The description is as follows. It is big in the beginning and then gradually increases towards the end. This can be compared to a creeper or wisteria flower. The base opens big and then gradually flower buds appear. In practice, the Japanese senitsuke appear more often in compounded rather than in singular form. For example, a yuri may be a haya yuri, fast yuri, an ara yuri, rough yuri, etc. Compounded melodic types are also typical of Tibetan Buddhist chant and described in Sakyapandita's treatise. There, a list of 6 specific qualities of recitation reminiscent of the Natyasastra's Patya Alamkara appears. Though the Japanese treatises are less systematic with this respect, the Tibetan and Sanskrit parallels are summarized in the chart that you're looking at right now. Okay, so let's take a listen to the Shichi-san while looking at a traditional score. Be sure to pay attention to the yurisori, the senitsuke described as a wisteria flower or a creeper flower. I'll point that out to you as we go along. The video we'll watch was designed by Tsukagoshi Chusei, a resident priest at Tohokokuji, which is a Shingon temple in Ibaraki Prefecture, Torida City in Japan. We'll just listen to the first half of the first pada, which is preceded by the seed syllable om. And I'll try to point out the correspondence between the Romanized Sanskrit text and the Chinese character transliterated Sanskrit text as we go through this. Okay, here we go. This is om. This is the yurisori melodic type, like a wisteria flower. Okay, and you'll notice that the double consonant in the Romanized Sanskrit is represented by 2 syllables in the Sino-Japanese text. Okay, so from the 10th century on, the Indian Buddhist monastic curriculum increasingly made use of texts composed within the milieu of the Buddhist Mahasiddhas, non-institutional practitioners who, in addition to being known for their antinomian practices, were also known for their being in dialogue with the Kaparika and Pashupata Shaiva cults, and the latter's intricate forms of song and dance. A tradition of such late-period esoteric song and dance has been preserved and developed in the rituals of Newari Buddhist priests of Nepal. Here, the Sanskrit songs are known as chacha, a contraction of the Sanskrit charya, which itself refers to a musical subtype of the prabandha form in the 13th century Sanskrit compendium of pre-Mughal period classical Indian music, the Sangita Ratnakara. For the past year, I have been undergoing an intensive oral transmission of Charya songs from a Newari Shakya whose teacher was a great popularizer of these songs in modern Nepal, Guru Ratnakaji Bajracharya. Interestingly, each Charya song has an attendant shloka which has formal similarity to the Sanskrit esoteric Buddhist hymns of Japan, such as the Shichi-san. A popular piece in the Newari Charya tradition is Shri Avalokiteshvara, a hymn of praise to the deity White Avalokiteshvara. I will now chant the shloka for this song. You will hear that, like the Japanese shloka, there is a tendency for there to be one significant melismatic prolongation per every 4 syllables, or pada, of the shloka. And note that the second stanza, or patya, will be repeated, as is the custom. Okay. And I'll point out the text here. Lokeshvaram Shilam Shantam Amogam Gunasagaram Amitam Kritam Namami Amogapasinam Amitamba Kritam Aude Namami Amogapasinam. Okay. I will now sing the first verse of the Charya song itself. Each verse in a Charya song has 3 stanzas termed tala, kvala, and dua, respectively. The last of these is a refrain. Also, note the interpolation of non-lexical syllables to facilitate the setting of the text to predetermined melodic formulae, or raga. The raga for this piece is nata, and the meter, or tala, is jati. The singing will be accompanied by the Tingchu symbols that I hope come through in the Zoom recording, Zoom call. Ayam Shita Arna E Kamuka Doye Netra Abibida Aratnamo Holy Langkri Hidadea Anama Minamami Shri Karu Nama When taken together, the Japanese and Newari traditions of Sanskrit Buddhist chant and song, in addition to being rare survivals of musical traditions with roots in ancient and medieval India, are also a musical illustration of the change in attitude towards the Vinaya in medieval Indian Buddhist monasteries, a change that occurred between the 7th and 13th centuries. This change was ultimately the result of accepting, after their subjugation to a Buddhistic hermeneutic which removed certain irreconcilable antinomian features, the practices of the Mahasiddhas, among which were the secular musical forms in vogue among Shaiva practitioners. This change took place within the context of a disintegrating political and social order on the Indian subcontinent. This transition from highly regulated Sanskrit chant to intricate Sanskrit song forms is perfectly illustrated in the stylistic difference between the Japanese and Newari shloka on the one hand and the Newari Charya songs on the other. As such, the study of the heretofore examined musical changes should be included in our consideration of the continuous shift between periods of order and disorder in South Asia, and the music itself, as pleasant as it is, should otherwise continue to be studied, recorded, and preserved for posterity. I hope that I have made at least the latter case here today. Thank you very much.
Stephen, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the beautiful the demonstration as well. I would love to hear that in its full setting with what would be the other instruments that would generally be performing alongside the shloka and the chant, and what role would kind of spontaneous variations have within the music? The performers would have an ability to expand the music or improvise in some sense?
Okay. So in terms of the Japanese shlokas, which are there's another name for them in Japanese. We call them bonsai. But those have no instrumental accompaniment except for the nyohachi, which are the cymbals that you see used in Tibetan monasteries as well. They're a little bit smaller. You clank together and rub like this, so they vibrate in a prolonged way. But those are only used at the end of the recitation. So they're not used during the recitation, just at the end, and there is no improvisation whatsoever with that regard. So that's the Japanese tradition. Yes. In terms of the Newari, and I'm much more familiar with the Japanese tradition. I've only been working on Nepal for a year or so now. But in terms of what I've learned, there is no improvisational leeway in either the shloka recitation or the charya songs themselves, except in one particular instance, which is that every charya song is preceded with what's called an alapa, just like we have in North Indian classical music. And that is, of course, able to be improvised on, as long as it stays within the general melodic contours of the first and second lines of the raga, actually. That's how that works. So there's a little leeway in the introductory alap section, but otherwise there's no improvisation. And then in terms of instrumentation for the charya songs, it's just these tinchu cymbals. And there's one other instrument that's occasionally used in songs for wrathful deities, which is the damaru, which I guess you would assume was brought in from the Kapalika Shaiva sects. That would be my thinking. So those two things, and there's no improvisation in that regard either.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's kind of tethered more to the text, to the lyric. Your contemplation is bringing you deeper into the image of the words and bringing out the vibration of the roots, the Sanskrit roots.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And my teacher right now of Charya songs is always focusing on the fact that this is not just music. You're meant to focus on the vibration and bring you into contact with the Buddhist teaching, which is how he's taught me anyway. Yeah, absolutely. And I should say also that in the Japanese shloka, which is what I worked on when I was on my PhD dissertation, the elongation of the vowels quite nicely corresponds to the prolongation of the melismatic lines. So there's definitely a focus on, or at least there was in ancient times, of the phonology as well.
So
as you would expect.
I caught only the last part of your talk. Sorry, Stephen, but it was very fascinating. And you used the word raga in the context of the shloka, and it seemed to me like a dhyana mantra. Basically, dhyana mantras that are often used in Drupal form in Indian music. So, can you hear me?
I can, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether there is any connection with the Drupal, dhyana mantras, in Indian kind of Drupal music.
Wow. Yeah, I'm actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to look a little bit deeper into that. I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Richard Wittes, but he's worked on Drupad as well as working on the Charya songs back in the 90s. He wrote an article on this. And pardon?
No, I'm just acknowledging what you're saying.
And absolutely, there is a probable link maybe between the Drupad and the Charya songs via that whatever the Prabandha form was in the 13th century Sangita Ratnakara. So I would not be surprised at all if the use of a shloka before the Charya song proper is related to the Drupad Gyana mantra that you're talking about. That absolutely would be fascinating to look into, which is why I'm going to do it. Thank you very much for that question as well as advice.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Thank you.
So excuse me, this is all rather news to me, but I guess kind of more overarching question is like, as far as like chant versus song, what would be like the implications for like the effect on the culture? Did you notice, is there like noticeable differences in like government structures connected to one? I think you were kind of alluding to that a little bit, like as one, does that kind of make sense? Like what, as far as like singing effect on a culture versus like chanting, is there like a connection there as far as like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the chanting is highly regulated, just like you would expect from anything descended from Vedic chant. All of the intonational patterns are supposedly. I'll go ahead and back up. I just mentioned that the Japanese shloka, if you how do you say this? If you change the Chinese characters back into the Sanskrit and look at the phonology, the melodies, even though they have the same kind of, one long prolongation per pada, per 4 syllables, just like in the Newari shlokas, the Japanese one correspond more to the phonology than the Newari shlokas. So I'm assuming that there used to be a methodology basically how to chant a shloka based on the phonology, and that kind of settled into a defined melodic type in the Newari tradition. But either way, there's no. It's a very ancient practice that's based on Vedic chanting methodology. So in terms of song, they're secular music forms. That's the big difference, is that the chant is highly regulated, and the songs, at least before they became solidified as they are now in Nepal, were really secular types of music. So the disintegration of the political order in India led directly to the acceptance of the practices of the Mahasiddhas. In other words, using secular song forms in and of itself is almost an antinomian practice from the perspective of the culture, at least the Buddhist culture. So that's kind of the idea. Does that make sense as an answer to your question?
yeah, yeah. This is a
And
lot
in
of new
fact,
information, but that helped with the overarching picture for me. Thank you.
And what was fascinating for me when I was digging into this is realizing that how similar the antinomian features that are brought into from the 10th century probably in Bengal and northwest India, but when that finally became incorporated into the monasteries in India,
Whatever you needed then.
Okay.
pardon? Anyway, what was interesting to me is that there seems to be this early Hellenistic faiths in Gandhara, in which there, at least at the lay level, there were these kind of Bacchanalian, Dionysian practices that would be seen as antinomian features in the Siddha culture, right? So it's almost like something was stamped out in the monastic context and then revived again in the medieval period, almost. If you know what I mean.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Great question.
No, please, 220 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for your wonderful presentation. So yeah, because of the time, so we need to invite the second.
I'm just
Thank you
so
so
thankful
much.
that for the opportunity to talk to you all. This has been great. This has been really fun. I'm sorry I have to scat out. I got
Thanks,
a
Stephen.
Thank
one-year-old
you.
son in the other room, so going to sleep. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. So now we need to keep each presentation for 20 minutes. So Sonu, yeah, sorry, I maybe pronounce your name wrongly, but Sonu, yeah, now Max is on you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So today, topic of my presentation is Bhojpuri Folk Song of India, Study of Gender Marginalization. And my paper will be dealing with the interdisciplinary study of Bhojpuri song of North India, relating it with the concept of caste, class, gender, and culture. And will try to situate this folk song in an interdisciplinary context of social exclusion and marginalization of pupils based on caste, class, gender, and culture, and will consequently explore the traumatic experiences on pupils' life, especially on women. Such folk songs are embedded in everyday life, struggle, and people of different classes, caste, gender, and culture. This folk song can be considered as performance and reflection of socially excluded people, especially women, and its physical and mental effect on them. This study is compelling cultural analysis of folk songs sung primarily by lower caste women in North India in the field, at weddings, during different household works, during travels, and in other settings. Smita Tiwari Jassal uses these songs to explore how ideas of caste, gender, sexuality, labor, and power may be strengthened, questioned, and fine-tuned through music. At the heart of the book, Unearthing Gender, Folk Song of North India by Smita Tiwari Jassal is a library of folk song in their original Bhojpuri and in English translation, framed Jassal insight into the complexity of gender and power. The significance of this folk song lies in their suggesting and hinting at themes rather than directly addressing them. Women sing what they often cannot talk about. The song offers an entry into the everyday culture of marginalized group of women who have rarely been the focus of systematic analytical inquiry. Scholars of literature, folk and folklore have long recognized folk song repertoire as valuable source to collect, analyze, and interpret not only data but emotion related to pupils' everyday life. In her path-breaking book, anthropologist Smita Tiwari Jassal explores women lives in rural North India using the Bhojpuri folk song as a medium to analyze pupils' day-to-day life while especially focusing on women life from dawn to dusk. Through this study, she tries to reclaim the language and deep-rooted culture of his ancestors while paying homage to them. As she stated while quoting Ortner and Whitehead, I quote, her study focuses its investigation on the way song as a pupil's oral tradition illuminate the social construction of gender through which overreaching caste and gender ideology are transmitted and reproduced. Because the kind of relation that obtain between men and women are not merely determined by the biological given but also are product of social and cultural process. Song make it possible for us to understand the organization of maleness and femaleness in relation to a particular society. As the same song suggests how dominant ideology are not merely compiled with accommodated and reinforced but also resisted and interrogated, they also enable us to address the question of agency. Unquote. Songs, as Narayan stated, I quote, provide a medium for expressing emotions that are taboo topics in everyday conversation. Unquote. Subjecting these texts to scrutiny allow us a glimpse of pupil intimate worlds. While trying to analyze Bhojpuri culture critically, Jassal stated in culture that do not openly discuss inner emotional states, Song are the shared tradition through which emotion are expressed, thus providing a medium for the expression of what might be taboo in everyday conversation. And we also learn that women are prone to conceal detail about ill treatment in their marital home so as not to alarm their natal kings. For instance, below song represent the pathos of such alarming pathetic condition of women recorded by Jassal while doing her fieldwork in the village of Chachakpur, Jaunpur, Uttar Pradesh, which is sung by a lower caste woman, Urmila Maurya. सोनवा ते जरई बहिनी सोनरा दुकनिया बहिनी जरथिन ससुरिया होरा लोहरा ते जरई बहिन लोहरा दुकनिया बहिनी जरथिन ससुरिया होरा ई दुख जानी कहिया भैया बाबा की अगवा सबहा बैठी पछथैया हो राम ई दुख जानी कहिया मैया की अगवा छतिया पीटी मर जइहा हो राम. It's roughly translated as gold melt at the goldsmith, sister burn away at her in-laws, iron smelt at the ironsmith, sister wastes away at her in-laws. Brother, don't speak of this grief to father. In the assembly, he will be filled with remorse. Brother, don't speak of this to mother. Beating her breast, she will die of grief. This study also tries to point pupils' surface understanding of certain culture and tradition, and accordingly their response to it, sometime in positive way and other negatively, depends on their level of understanding. In North India, from the 19th century onward, form of women entertainment attracted the attention of social reformer, urban intellectual, emerging middle classes, and caste association, each intending to initiate change in the social and customary behavior of women and lower caste. And they are very desperate to stop women from the practice of singing abusive song at different occasions where reversal of role is common as it lead to embarrassment among them. And for such action, they have argued that such gali or abusive genre encourages women, I quote, confrontational behavior and aggression and prompted to transgress boundary and challenge family relationship, and such belief overshadow the rationale behind people's oral tradition within the society. Such study reflect on how conventional understanding of caste, gender, labor, agrarian relation, and complex working of power may be strengthened, questioned, and fine-tuned through the study of folk song. The power of this song also lies in their ability to hint and suggest rather than directly address social themes, and this also helps to understand interplay between gender, caste, class, and culture. This folk song become more significant as it poses voice of unlettered, multiply marginalized section while focusing on systematic critical inquiry, which is very rare in such cases. As Jassal tried to raise questions of injustice poignantly in her study that, I quote, the concern and world of Dalit and subaltern women have largely remained obscure, not only because of upper caste men and women's distance from Dalit struggle, but also because the latter's lack of integration into mainstream knowledge, academic disciplines, and even the middle class women's movement, unquote. Life of marginalized women are totally distinct from elite upper class women, but at certain point of how the breach can be found in such folk song while transgressing every type of caste class distinction. And this below fragmented folk song sung by Dalit street musician at Buxar Fair in 14 January 2000, taken from Jassal writing, succinctly make point toward it. कहियो बिदैया दिहला बक्सर में दही दिहला गैया नैयरा पघा धराई दिला हो बाबूजी पहला में बुढ़वा बड़वा दूसरा में गरीब हो घरवा तीसर में जादू गरवा खुजला हो बाबूजी. It's roughly translated as, why do you get me married? Dumped me here in Buxar, handed me like a cow to be tied up. Why did you, O father? First, a groom is so aged, then a home is improvised. Third, a magician you found for me. Why did you, O father? This book is an archive of songs collected by Smita Tiwari Jassal over 5 years of fieldwork in rural Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, organizing each chapter around a particular body of song. As she stated, I quote, her song collection grew the link between the agrarian structure, patriarchal ideology, social control, and women's lack of power were thrown into sharp relief, unquote. And she remarked that with the mechanization of farming activity, several women labor song genre like Jatsar and especially Song of the Millstone are on the edge of decline. There were so many type of folk song according to the work and workplace of women. I'll be discussing some of them. The Jatsar song of the millstone, the long ballad that women sing while grinding grain and spices within their household boundary with construction and reproduction of gender identity while teaching certain societal norms and consequences of its breakdown and transmitting social values, outlining codes of honor from one generation to other orally. It is not only voice of experience, but also of authority that instruct subordinate one. As Jassal remarked, I quote, the apparently benign and empowering practice of women singing the song of the millstone enable wider social and gender specific lesson about both power and powerlessness to be most effectively learned, unquote. According to Jashal, there were many types of songs sung under this genre, which she broadly divided into three categories. First, song of women family life in their conjugal homes, which include both sweet and bitter stories. Second, song of conflict within family kin and its solutions, specially focusing on turbulence of daughter-in-law. Third song is of alerting in detail about the result of crossing certain societal norms such as caste boundary by women. Jassal also advised scholars about deciphering the meaning of this folk song as Narayan opined in his article published in 1995 about Dunde's suggestion back in 1966 that while a focus on context is important to ascertaining the meaning of folk song, to reflect on how the genre are indigenously conceived, the researcher must also actively elicit the meaning of folklore from the folk themselves, unquote. Sometimes Dalit women sing song obliquely to impress or taunt upper class women and men, from which higher class people distance themselves, calling it as outspoken, challenging, and subversive. Women homelessness and their lack of security in both natal and conjugal home that leads to enforcement of control for ensuring her conformity with established norm and behavioral expectation is very beautifully reflected in the song sung by a Dalit singer in Suraya, Jaunpur. धाना कहाँ पैलू सुरुज हरवा, सती बहनिया प्रभु भैया दिही सुरुज हरवा, हम नहीं मानबई धाना तोरी बचनिया होना, धाना हम लेबई धर्मी करैया होना, मोराई पाचो बरवा भैया मितवा होना, नवा बाबा एज खबरवा जनैया होना, नाही काहे हमरे बाबा जी के अगैया होना, रामा तोहरी बेटी भाबे वही करैया होना, अरे अरे बैठनी गनवे के लोगवा होना, रामा बिचवा में धर्मी करैया होना, आवा रोए भैया बाबा होना, बेटी आज जौ सना थारू, बेटी तो ही जाके दलवा खनैबा होना, तू ही गलत बेटी जिया थे खान के गरैबा होना, बिचवा हो रामा चढ़ू गए धरबी करैबा होना, खौलत तेलवा में सतमल कूदी होना, धदकी अगनिया बूझी गैले होना, अरे मेरी सतली रनिया छुटी गैली होना. It roughly translated as, whence came you by that necklace, wife? Lord, my brother bought me this shimmering necklace. Wife, your word cannot be believed. A test of truth from you I want with the shimmering word. My 7 brothers are friends. Barber, you must inform my father. Your daughter is to be tested with the heated oil vat. On the side are seated the village folk. In the center, the vat of truth is ready. Brother and father come crying, daughter, we will bury you right here with our own hand if indeed you are found not to be true. In the center, the vat of truth is ready. into the flames, Satmal leaps, into the peeping hot oil, Satmal leaps. The ragging flames are immediately extinguished. O my true Rani, she left me, alas. This type of folk song conclude with a remark that a discourse delivered by woman to woman about intra-kin relation may also contain as an ideological subtext a discourse licensing female subordination to patriarchal authority in other non-domestic situations. In short, the discourse about the desirability of female obedience in the domestic domain can also be translated into the desirability of women worker obedience in the sphere of agriculture production as well. This economic dimension, which disempowered women not just within the domestic sphere, but also beyond its confine, is frequently overlooked. In the second section, our attention shifts from the courtyard, Jatsar, to the field, Kajli song, exploring songs women sing when involving productive labor in the field as songs are inseparable from women. This study reflects on the usefulness of the fieldwork songs as source material for unearthing the labor condition of women on lower rung of caste and agrarian hierarchy. For this, Jussel included the report of Committee on the Status of Women, exposed the degree to which official statistics highlighting the unpaid family labor underestimated women contribution of 1975. A significant question this study take up is how the voice of song might be different from that of speech. As Kiran Narayan recommendation to stop seeing song merely as text to mind for so-called folk point of view and to focus instead on context within which each performer might creatively assign new meaning to the songs. As Jussel stated that a characteristic feature of the song in this study is their spirit of abundant, carefree in mood. They also express an unrestrained sexuality, especially when at a safe distance from the controlling patriarchal gaze. Women, instead of more than equal participation in both household and field, are always subject of subjugation. As Jussel rightly opined, the voice of Amravati, a Teli oil presser, village woman in this regard, and she could to be caught asleep after daybreak as a new bride invite hostility, social sanction and gossip from extended kin and even neighbors. This can be very hard to combat. I could not bear the loss of face, especially since the values and training received from the natal home are called into questions. Mother of bride are always careful to impart this training, unquote. And this explanation supports the well-known fact given by most of the women that a bride work culture, productivity, sense of responsibility, duty, and industrious nature would be judged through her work as well as her sleeping and waking practice, not simply by their responsiveness and virtue. The song makes more sense when heard in the context of the gender division of labor within the laboring household. Another importance of Kajli song lies in its exploration of protest of male migration by women, migration relation and influence on others, especially on women, and how she negotiate with such situation. In this context, Jussel very appropriately quoted F. Osela and K. Gardner. I quote, the scale and history of migration from the subcontinent since the mid-19th century leave no doubt about the profound impact upon the more intimate relationship within household and ways in which gender relations are destabilized through migration, a theme that has received only marginal attention in the social scenes, unquote. Samita Sen research point to the importance of examining the continued linkage between the shifting gender equation in the countryside and the emergence of the urban working class. Following Kajli song very desperately make point toward protests of such male migration, and it's so that women can do anything for stopping her men, as well her critique of such work and income while reflecting on her own capability of making more money while living together with their husband and family. अरे हरिया बन जरीगा हमरे बलम पर देसवानी करीगा अरे हमके नैहरवा में तजगा, अरे सेजिया न सोवे हरैया बन जरीगा, अरे 5 रुपया समी तोरी नौकरिया, 10 हमी घरी में देबी ना, रखबई अखिया के समनवा, पिया के जाय देबे ना, चिठिया ना भेजे, चौपतिया ना भेजे, अपने जियरा के बवलवा समी लिखी भेजे ना, चिठिया पे चिठिया लिखी मेहरैया, अपनी छोड़े के नौकरिया घर चल आवता ना, चिठिया पे चिठिया लिखे मेहरैया, घर कबहू ना आबू ना, अपनी छोड़ी के नौकरिया घर कबहू ना आबू ना. It roughly translated as, oh, the green wood are scorched, my love left for foreign land, oh, abandon me in my natal home, the bed hold no charm, the green wood burnt up. Oh, beloved, your service worth just 5 rupees, 10 I could give you in my own home and keep you before my eyes, not let you go, beloved. No letters, not a four-liner did he send. About the state of his heart, he did not write. Letter upon letter send the Mehri, return home, leave service and return home. Letter upon letter send the Maharaj, I shall not return home, giving up my job, I shall never return home. This study critically analyzed unheard culture and people while unearthing women labor conditions. Jessel point toward women negotiation to obtain leave from work over insight into the nature of their involvement in labor process both as a wife and as a producer. In this sense, this study also re-examined the relationship between music and production, poetry and power as specific form of women bargaining. The song texts have wider implication for women consciousness, struggle, and politicization, even as they caution against seeing all women folklore as resistant. Third section of this paper deal with the marriage song or called Biyaha or Birha song. Emotion in a rite of passage take as its subject song associated with marriage as a rite of passage are a critical site for examining women ambiguous relationship to patriarchal ideology. As Jussel stated, song associated with marriage aim to analyze those emotions that cannot be apprehended by observing the ritual structure of the wedding ceremony alone. My concern with emotion also highlighted the structural ambivalence and contradiction that attend momentous phase in women's life cycle. And following song from Upadhyaya 1990 very poignantly point toward destabilizing effect of the marriage on both daughter and her family. दीवा गरनवा बाबा मंडवी लगेला, कब दोनी उगरा होई, हमरा हे बाबा के सोनवा थरिया, हो चुबत झंझनी होई, उहे थरिया बाबा दमादे के दी तू हो, तबो रउआ उर्गई होई. It roughly translated as, the daughter's eclipse begin in the wedding space. When does that eclipse pass? My own father had a golden plate that resounded at just a touch. That very plate father gifted to his son-in-law, that is when the eclipse is passed. In Bhojpuri community, marriage and concept of dowry intertwined with it is very dominant from the very early age. Despite being aware of its origin, which was very positive, now it has taken shape of evil in our society. And a very dominant reason behind women marginalization, not only as a wife, daughter-in-law, but as a daughter and sister also. And following song very beautifully critiques such evil tradition of dowry from Srivastava. भैली बिहा पड़ले सिर से नूर, 9 लाख मांगे दे दहेज रे, घर में का बा भाड़ा आंगन दे पटखेली, सतुरु के दिया जानी होय रे. It's roughly translated as, the wedding over, vermilion ceremony completed, they asked for 9 lakh dowry. In despair, mother threw out the cooking pot into the courtyard. One should not wish the birth of a daughter even to enemies. This song also reflects light on the different ritual associated with marriage and its significance, such as Chumavan, offering of kisses as blessing. Bride demand for her share in her natural property through such songs, her revolt against mismatched marriage, etc. Jassal very confidently put forward her view regarding women land rights and stated, rural women access to and control over land is arguably the single most empowering strategy they have at their disposal in their fight to achieve gender parity and redress existing power imbalance. And
Excuse me, so we are reaching to 25 minutes, so can you finish it in 2 minutes?
okay.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
So next, may I conclude in 2 minutes?
Yes, 2
Yeah.
minutes. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jessel first began recording songs during her research on women land rights. She tells us that her earlier project focused on making women agrarian activity visible by distinguishing it from household duties, which were not recognized as productive labor. Jessel discovered that the songs she had begun collecting endorsed the finding of research conducted in the 1970s, namely that women regarded much of their agricultural labor as an extension of their household duties and that this labor therefore remained unrecorded. She was very aware about the fact that women of Bhojpuri community never going to speak on issue like land rights, patriarchal domination, but she was very sure about the inherent determination of women which can only be flushed out through song. For example, she encountered marriage song that narrate stories of bride claiming land share from their father. Jessel made clear that she is aware of the danger of reading resistance into ethnographic situation where it may be inaccurate. Based on her vast intense reading, Jessel brilliantly attempted to multiply possibility for interpretation, and this helped her to make this research path-breaking. As Rehana Khesgi remarked, while quoting Jessel, songs have constituted one of the few spaces for resistance traditionally available to lower caste women. This example is one of the few that is directly read as resistant. Overall, Jessel project break new ground for ethnomusicologists to take up the challenge of combining research on the labor of music making in the context of rural agrarian political economics by including a variety of song style from one geographic region and language family. Jessel provide a broad and evocative sense of musical word of her interlocutor, photograph of the woman Jessel worked with and carefully crafted excerpt from their story and interview session contributing to the intimate and dynamic portrait that emerged from this book. An engaging combination of detailed ethnographic and insightful interpretation of song texts and their social significance. This book is well suited for advanced undergraduate students and scholar in literature, culture study, ethnomusicology, anthropology, gender and sexuality studies, South Asian studies, and agrarian study, as well as all who are concerned with expressive culture in its gender nuances. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonu. So because of the time, we will just take one question. So if you have any question or any comments, so please raise your hand or just open your mic to share. Yeah. Thank you. Is there any questions?
I could ask a quick question. Thank you so much. I was curious about your thoughts on, you read so many interesting lyrics and how these lyrics are transgressive and how they break taboos. And I was wondering if you could comment on the music, itself, outside of the lyrics. How do you feel that was also participating in this act of transgression? Like outside of the lyrical space, how are these artists changing the ways in which they compose and arrange sonic space and create musical space differently than maybe traditional musical space, like incorporating contemporary instruments or digital mediums, and how that's you find that is beneficial in terms of this the transgression that they're aiming for, and how maybe it may not be.
Thank you for your question. Actually, Bhojpuri community women are very submersive they can't speak openly. And this is the only way through which they can tell about their problems, their issue, what they are facing, which can't they express in an open way, because it's a very patriarchal dominated society. So there is only a one medium through which they can transgress such directly in that, like it can't, I don't think it can't make so many change, but little by little, it can make small changes day by day.
Right,
That's my
right. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so meaning like the ways in which they would compose new melody or rhythm. A lot of times it's rhythm that becomes, like the new rhythms are developed, and also using technologies. Think about the rap revolution, right? It was like the ways in which technology and rhythm came together led to a whole different way of expressing something that was earlier maybe more repressed or unable to be expressed in the contemporary music culture. So I just wanted to reflect, ask you to reflect on that, but thank you, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to thank you too, Sonu, for that extraordinary presentation as a woman. And also that everything that you said, it's also happening in the, as you call it, higher or lower caste in Indian classical music. And the women, even when the music is the art and not the lyrics sometimes, but it's what you're saying is not just in the more in the lower caste or in the lyrics of the song, which is exactly what you're saying, but also unconsciously and liminally in Indian classical, very, very high level music, in the sense that you have to go to school, etc., to learn. And that the only way women can get into it on a stage and not in the back playing the tambura is when they separate from the gurus. It's very interesting. And then when they separate from even the friends, then they listen to the women very nicely and, with the sari and all that stuff. But yeah, it's exact. I think the edge here, the edge, EDGE, it's how do we transcend even the word, the vibration of the word caste. How we go beyond that, if it's possible, since India has so many years of that grounding on that word and that separation. What do we do? And I have ideas, of course, of how we go beyond those frontiers based on caste and social, position in life, and the quality of music as art, because the poetry of the songs is extraordinary. It's art. So thank you so much for bringing all these ideas, and maybe we can go beyond into all the music of India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all your sharing. Yeah. So yeah, because of the time, so we need to move on. Thank you so much, all of you. Yeah. So because we start maybe 15 minutes later, so we will end up around here 10:45-ish. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll pass them back to you, Sudipta. Sorry, Sudipta. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's Sudipta. I hope I am perfectly audible and visible. Okay, thumbs up. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to California Institute of Integral Studies for organizing this beautiful, beautiful conference and making it hybrid so that we, the people residing in South Asia, can easily access all the resources. Thanks for that. Thanks to my friend Aheli, she is here. I requested you and you granted that. She registered for it and she is here. She helped me throughout the process. And then after all these thanks, I want to apologize for my well-being. I am not really keeping well mentally, physically recently. Also, my laptop crashed badly last night, so I just had to manage a working PowerPoint presentation. And I am now going to share the screen of my mobile my phone. So probably you will not be able to see my face throughout my presentation. And of course, I will try to wrap it up by some 20 minutes. So looking forward, I am going to share my screen. Okay, so that's the title of my paper, Disorderliness and Ghettoization, Narrating the Quest for Homecoming with Popular Songs. To begin with, I will talk of ghettoization first. Ghettoization, to define the term, what ghettoization really means. Ghettoization is when a specific group of people with their unique ethnicities, cultures, and socioeconomic backgrounds find themselves pushed away from the rest within the society, or maybe overall within the city, or maybe the society. They have this constant feeling of being boxed in. Like imagine a community physically restricted to a certain area, dealing with really scarce resources, poor infrastructure, and very limited chances to be part of the broader opportunities that others can easily enjoy. There is also this feeling of being left out. So ghettoization isn't just about where you live physically, it's about being left out economically and emotionally, struggling to access good education, good lifestyle, and feeling disconnected from the larger social fabric, creating a cycle of disadvantages. And that can also shape their identities. So in ghettoization, the whole thing goes beyond geography, beyond economy, beyond politics. It molds the identity and culture of a community, creating a unique subculture maybe at times, but at the same time, it fuels the stereotyping, and it reinforces the hierarchical divisions in society, unfortunately. Next up, we will move to the theoretical construct of migration. Like there is so many migration theories. There are, to begin with the theories of migration, push factors and pull factors. Push factors are those conditions that can push you out of your comfort zone, your zone of belonging, your space, where you feel so very connected to the locality. There can be unemployment, there can be an overall risk of but there can be a lack of security, social security, economic, financial security. There can be extreme natural conditions like droughts, and there can be storms that actually pushes you rapidly to move out, to try something new, as there is nothing left in the place where you belong to. And the pull factors are those factors that attract people to come to its core. Maybe there is a city with ludicrous pull factors like potential of employment, some safer atmosphere for that matter, a better lifestyle, greater prospect of wealth maybe. So these can be some pull factors as well. But the major theoreticians of migration, say for example Ravenstein, so there are many hypotheses that Ravenstein puts forth, and some of them are like there is an inverse relationship between distance and volume of migration. Majority of migrants moves to short distances only. Migrants going long distance generally go by choice, by preference, to large centers of commercial trades and industries. Second, the native of the rural areas are more mobile than their counterpart in the urban areas. And the major direction of migration is from agricultural areas to the industrial areas. As we all know, we have read, in fact, Raymond Williams was talking about this in The Country and the City. We have read all those stories about the expansion of London, how from the neighboring villages, from the neighboring agricultural hubs, London was flooded during the 18th century. Next up, Ravenstein also states that migration is highly age selective, and that's really important to our discussion. Age selective, by that I mean people who falls under the category of working age group, just reaching the adulthood and seeking some better lifestyle, some better earning, they are more likely to display a greater propensity to migrate. Ravenstein also states that the volume of migration increases with the process of diversification of the economy and improvement in transport facilities. So more the transport facilities improve, there is a larger scope of migration, as you can already guess. So there is also Everett Lee, who among his many suggestions suggests that that individuals involved in migration have near perfect assessment of factors in the place of origin due to their long association with the place. However, the same is not necessarily true for that of the area of destination. I mean, there is always some element of ignorance and uncertainty with regard to reception of migrants in the new area. Now, of disorderliness. As per a Times of India report of 2019, almost half the population living in the state capital of Karnataka, Bengaluru, are migrants. And Bengaluru, the matter of the fact, is called the Silicon Valley of India or the IT capital of India. And the population percentage is a whopping 50.6%. See, amongst the total of 100% population of the city, more than half do not even belong to the city. According to the last official census, the number of migrants more than doubled since the previous census, when the city had a migrant population of only 20.8 lakhs out of a total population of more than 65 lakhs. So the share of migrants in Bengaluru at that time was nearly 32%, to be exact 31.92%. The 44.3 lakh people migrating into the city is almost the double the number of people who have migrated out of the entire state of Karnataka. The largest share of migrants to the city are from other places in Karnataka itself. And they take up 64% of the city's migrant population. Of the migrants from other states, Tamil Nadu, one of the neighboring states of Karnataka, from Tamil Nadu, they have 5.2 lakhs of people, of migrant workers who were coming in and working in Bengaluru in different IT corporate offices. And all these stats to prove that Ravenstein's hypothesis that the migrant workers do not move a long distance preferably, or to be exact, the volume of migration and the distance between the source and the destination are inversely proportionate to each other. Like this with the IT revolution, especially the metro cities, Kolkata, Delhi, Chennai, all those metro cities in India, how can I forget Mumbai? All these cities are being flooded with migrant white-collar office goers. But then there happens a very interesting thing that I would like to mention before I move into the musical part. So this is pretty interesting, you know. Say, for example, the cost of living in Kolkata is approximately 42% less expensive than that of Mumbai. So both these cities are in India itself, but there is a huge difference. So in concrete terms, if I would like to express, you'd need around 1,08,000 in Kolkata to maintain the same amount, the same standard of life that you can have with almost 2 lakhs per month in Mumbai. So it is almost the double. See, 42% gap between the cost of living of the two cities. and both being part of India and both being such giant metro cities, maybe the most important, two most important metro cities of India. Now, coming to the music part. Now, it seems a very innocent act to listen to the music you love. But is it really that simple? I don't really think so, considering the amount of privilege that you got to have to enjoy certain subscriptions. Let alone subscription, you first have to have a device and a decent internet connection to facilitate your choices. And we can hypothetically assume that our target population can do that as they are earning just about enough. Next up, we can consider how people get addicted to medicines and therapies. Take me, for example. I really got addicted to random head massages from a local salon. When it occurred to me that they do it very well, that every time I get this, my headache is temporarily gone. Then with the start of COVID, I got addicted to hand sanitizers. I got almost bankrupt buying sanitizers day in, day out for me, for my family. Then when I discovered that paracetamol can prove to be really helpful with body aches, whenever I thought that my legs might cause some pain, I would take some paracetamol beforehand. Now, medicines in the long run can have serious side effects, right? As I am facing some currently. But music is pristine and pure with no such side effects. But as a therapy, getting into the ritual scale is quite common. Now, let me jump into the song text. First of all, we have John Denver's very famous 1971 number, Take Me Home Country Roads. Yes, it was released in 1971. The general people of India, we don't have the Shenandoah or Blue Ridge Mountains, but we do have our own Ganges and Narmadas and our own Himalayas and smaller mountain ranges. But still, we can miss West Virginia. The number of streams with the Indian population, the humongous amount of population of India, Spotify and YouTube are flooded by Indians. These are some basic details about the song. And I would like to draw your attention to the graph where the valence reaches more than 60% for this particular song, Take Me Home Country Roads. Valence means the higher the percentage is, you tend to get happier by listening to that song. Now, these are some comments that I took from the YouTube comment box. I have cropped out the names of the users just for the sake of privacy. And you can, of course, read, like, maybe we are not born in West Virginia, but we can miss the place. The song is about being homesick and not about West Virginia. The song, as you might have already read, was not. It is, in fact, one of the state songs of West Virginia. But then, let alone the official part, the emotional kind of impact that this song generally do have to the common population is staggering, is so good to see. The comment box feels really healthy. Everyone talking about being homesick, about their parents who are not anymore, and they miss them, they miss their home. And yes, it is true that the song is not about West Virginia, but about home. Then the next song is Aurora's Runaway. So the title is actually not very famous during 2019, 2020, just about the time when the COVID was getting in. This song went viral all over TikTok, Instagram for a different reason, for reels. But then if you deeply look into the lyrics and interpret it in your own way, probably the most dominant interpretation that will come up will be of the opening lines, where you can actually feel a worker moving out of his comfort zone or her comfort zone, going out in the open wide world with lucrative dreams. But all these were wrong. All these were false. Like just like Everett Lee mentioned, that they tend to have false images, false hopes about the area of destination. And now that girl wants to come back to the place, to her place, where she actually belonged to. Now, the general stat, and here you will see the valence stat is actually very low. It's near about 10%. So you will not be very happy listening to the song. You will feel rather sad. Again, the same kind of technique, the YouTube comment box, and again, a wholesome sets of comment about home, about parents. It is probably about the people. But is it only about the people? Our next song and the penultimate song, Nikle The Kabhi Hum Ghar Se, Ghar Dil Se Magar Nahi Nikla. This is a very famous track from the recently released Shah Rukh Khan starrer, Donkey. It released in December 2023, in fact. This song is written by none other than Javed Akhtar, really famous for his lyrics writing capabilities. Now, this particular song, you can actually see the translation in my slide on the first point. Like, home is not only the people, home is where our heart is. The film was about migration only. People really looked forward to realize their hopes for a better lifestyle, but they were fooled, and they left no stone unturned to come back to India, to their place. And there in the climax scene, we have this beautiful song, and the stats for this song as well. The valence, you will again see that it is not more than 20%. So again, you will feel nostalgic, you will probably cry, you will feel sad and not happy at all about hearing from people who cannot reach their home, who are struggling to reach their home for years. And once the female protagonist, played by Taapsee Pannu in the film, she reaches her home, she dies. All through her life, she only tried to get to London from a rural Punjab. And then when she struggles to come back to Punjab, she dies the same day. She was probably diagnosed with cancer, of course, but yes, that's about the destiny. And the last song that I will consider for today is a Bengali number, a recent number, Gai Ghore Ferar Gan, sung by Poroma Banerjee. And it was dictated by one of the pioneering figures of Bangla rock music, Gautam Chattopadhyay. This song is about, again, the home. And it here in this song, you'll find that there is this romantic relationship being established between home and childhood. The innocence with which we approach the nature. We'll look forward to that connection in this very song, Gai Ghore Ferar Gan. Again, the balance is just about 20%. But the fact is, this song narrates the inability to get to home. So no way that the balance could go up. Now, to conclude my presentation, look, this Ghore Ferar Gan, it is kind of, I don't expect everybody to learn Bangla, or I can sing a few verses of that song. But a similar kind of expression you will find in the very famous poem, The Deserted Village, written by Oliver Goldsmith during the late 18th century, and that kind of population migration from the agricultural England to the trade center of London. The same kind of imagery you will find in Poroma Banerjee's song here. Now these ghettos being so crowded and people relating to each other on their shared point of pain, there is always this public opinion looming on the head. So obviously Jürgen Habermas comes in here. So the houses or the apartments, crowded, never become a part of a private sphere actually. Therefore, there are no homes and only houses, only the concrete structures, and no feeling of home, because always the public opinion is looming over your head, is gazing on you, and people will get homesick with the lack of home and listen to songs of homesickness. And that is actually that should actually be the case, I mean. So yeah, I would like to wind up my presentation here. If any questions from your end can come, I will surely address them. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll take one or two questions here. So if you have any questions or you want to share anything, please just raise your hand or open your mic. Yeah. So, okay, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. Yeah,
Thanks.
because of the time, yeah, we need to move on. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure thing. Thank you. Thanks to you.
So yeah, our last panelist today is Jonathan. So I will give the mic. Do you want me to zoom in a little bit here? Or it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, okay.
As long as people can hear. Everybody can hear me? So I will do a presentation that will weave music in with thinking. And as a scholar practitioner and a raga musician and a jazz musician who grew up playing saxophone and a raga musician that lived in Calcutta learning raga music, I'm engaging with academics from a scholar practitioner perspective. And I wrote a paper to read, but I felt much more called to actually try to weave the music in because the music is so much, it's an integral part of the type of thinking that I'm trying to do. So I will be improvising my way through this musically and through thinking, trying to find the horizons between thinking and music. And I think that there's a lot of common themes that have been going through this panel already. Sudipta, homecoming, and the idea of ritual, and then in Sonu, this idea of music as a site of transgression, and these are themes that are important as well to my talk here. A little bit more about the methodology I've been learning with Dr. Banerjee, who's I'm happy to have here, and he has been teaching a form hermeneutics called immanent hermeneutics, and I'll read a quick quote, which is really the invitation to my research here. The basis of this methodology is holistic. It's an interpretation of the cultural history of the praxis and the spatio-temporal meanings this makes possible. In engagement with the paradoxical goal of becoming towards a plane in which absolute monism and integral pluralism coexist as one without erasing or subordinating another. And this would be a goal of becoming, and I'll be developing upon this using Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga metaphysics as taught by Dr. Banerjee. So the thesis of this paper, this presentation, is how can raga music be practiced and understood as an individual and collective sonic ritual or sonal ritual? And how can this, in the practice of this and the experience of this, be experienced as an integral image, which may help in the cultivation of an integral consciousness and the realization of a spiritual politics based on divine anarchy. And in this sense, I'm framing a raga as not just a musicological, like understanding it not just musicologically, but understanding it as a psycho-cosmological structure of shared aspiration. And as we go through the presentation, I will be playing a little bit, which is hopefully going to be building, so as we go, how I have come to experience and feel that a raga can be understood also, not only as a sonic ritual, but as a sonic yantra. to live in Calcutta for about a decade, and I would like to contextualize a little bit of the culture that I learned the music within, and how it has a braided history that I'm understanding between two different tropes here. The sannyasa as a spiritual renunciant, in which a raga is a spiritual technology of becoming, and it leads to the goals of the type of practice that you are practicing. It leads to and based on a certain metaphysics. So the moksha, which would be liberation outside of life, or jivan mukti, freedom and within life. And sannyasa can be thought in distinction to samsara, which would be a worldly enjoyer. And this can play out, I see how this plays out in the history of Indian music, as through the classical arts, as they were patronized in the royal imperial courts in Mughal and pre-Mughal Hindu imperial courtly cultures. And in this context, raga music can be understood as cultivating a connoisseur culture, a culture of connoisseuring the raga, in which one enjoys and consumes this music as an object or a flavor of consumption. And while living in Calcutta, I found that both of these coexist in contemporary raga music practice within the practitioners and within myself as well. And so how have, my question was, how has these two tropes kind of transposed themselves and modulated into modernity and into contemporary times? And this creates a certain tension, this braided fate is also a tension between raga music as a technology of transcendence or as a flavor of consumption within what Debashish Banerjee calls an ontology of ownership. If we look at our modern epoch as being contained within this type of ontology, then music is always, and raga music will always be received and engaged in which it was an object to be owned, to be consumed. And this is what I found to be troubling. And I was wondering how we can kind of think beyond this dialectic. Is there another way in which we don't fall on one side of the other, following the pureness of the past and rejecting the contemporary container we live in? Or we just embrace technology and we embrace the contemporary times and the markets, and we kind of compromise some of the traditional ideals. So I learned raga music as a sadhana of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, as taught by my first and my main guru, Shantanu Bhattacharya. And based on the goals and the metaphysics of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, we have an imminent and world-affirming goals based on jivan mukti and liberation within life, but as well the goal of transformation and the spiritualization of materiality and matter itself. And through recontextualizing the praxis of raga music, the sadhana, the spiritual discipline of it, I feel that this can open to understanding raga music as functioning as an individual and collective sonic ritual. And this offers possibilities beyond the individualistic notion of spiritual cultivation of the I, in which the I would just either escape or would enjoy the life through my own individualistic pursuits. But also, it helps us get out of the opposite of that, in which we are captured by a they, in this sense, the culture industries. But how can we see this as more of a community of practitioners and aspirants which share a common goal, which form a we? And following the French philosopher Gilbert Simondon, we can call this a trans-individuation. So we would have individuation in co-creative relation to collective individuation. And trans-individuation would be, in the most simple sense, understood as the unity of these two individuations. So getting a little bit more into how I understand this raga music as accomplishing these types of goals of becoming. So integral yoga is largely based upon an Upanishadic praxis. In this yoga, one first embarks upon, in Sri Aurobindo's formulation of it, that you build an intuitive mentality, and then you aim to cultivate, stabilize, and normalize an integral consciousness, which acts through knowledge by identity, understood Upanishadically as through the self-revelatory acts of seeing and hearing. So seeing drishti and hearing shruti. And this is important in our discussion because I find that raga music not only employs hearing, shruti, but also an act of seeing. And these two modalities I found working within me in the sadhana of raga music. And so how is it that we can bring these two types of darshans, in a way, or self-revelatory knowledges, to integrally be simultaneously exist and be together? Okay, so now I'm going to frame a little bit more about how I understand a ritual space, because a sonic ritual is a ritual. So according to Sri Aurobindo, a Hindu ritual or a puja can be considered as an architectonic organization of a sacred, spatial, and with sacred, spatial, and temporal materials, which create an interface or sieve, pavitra, with the outside. This is an arrangement between individual and cosmic forces and transcendent potentials, and it facilitates an interface between the infinite and the finite. To quote Sri Aurobindo, the cosmic powers act and exist. Humankind takes them upon himself, makes an image of them in his own consciousness, and endows that image with the life and power that the Supreme Being has breathed into his own divine forms and world energies. And I'd like to point out this notion of an image. So, now how it can, raga music, how do we think about raga music and this ritual space? And so, yeah, in my experience, I've said before here, raga music is a spiritual discipline or sadhana, and it's based on an experimental method of intensifying states of conscious will through concentration and contemplation and its realization. And this activates a sonal ritual to slowly evoke an effective gravity in a collective sound space. And it forms an aesthetic plane of consistency, which we can call a bhav, which then precipitates as a raga deity. So by approaching this raga deity with devotion, surrender, one can enter into identification with the raga, and that can culminate in an aesthetic rupture called rasa, invoking more than human individuating singularities. And this raga space that I'm speaking about is not just about on a musical level, it's not just even on a sonic level, but it's a heterogeneous site of becoming composed of multiplicities of musical and transmusical elements. So of course we have the musical elements like the speed in which you play, the notes that you play, the structure of the phrases and the mood. But you also have the techniques of the instrument, and you also have the space that you are in, whether it's your own practicing room or your house or a temple, and you have the participants in this ritual space who are listening and who are actively part of this space. And so we're opening up understanding raga outside of just a musical context. Okay, so traditionally, a raga has been understood as a scale, a mode, or a melodic form with an ascent and descent, which can be true on the very surface of things, but definitely we can't reduce it to that. I'm going to quote an early Indian musicologist, Ganguly, who describes the raga as being made of a sound image and a form image. And this is an interesting way which provides a link not only to the notion of how an image can function in ritual space, like I mentioned in Sri Aurobindo's quote, but bringing together thinking about a yantra as a form image and the becoming of that yantra in duration, as in this case, is a sound image. And so bringing back these two ideas of seeing and hearing through some kind of image, through these revelatory images. And so this brings us to think about mantra and yantra, which is a part of the traditional tantric practice. And I won't go into detail about either one of these because we're in a conference of South Asian studies, and I will assume that we have a basic understanding of mantra and yantra. And it means I can play them. But before that, I will actually just try to invite you to consider what I'm playing now with a little bit more of with a form of a yantra. So if you can think about any diagrammatic image, a yantra, if you prefer, from the Indian tradition, would be what I'm speaking about. But I'd like you to really consider that center point, the bindu. And I'd like you to consider that this drone that I'm playing and the main note that is providing the canvas which I am playing the raga on as that bindu, and try to experience the music from that place. So the main note that I was playing, all these phrases around, was called the sa in Indian music terminology. And this is being reinforced by the drone. And this would be one way to think about the bindu point, in which all of the other relationships in the yantra are centralized around. And this bindu point is an infinitely regressive point that continues. You'll never get to the end of it. And so this is how that sa can act, and it does act in the sadhana of music. Every single day you tune yourself, it's the attunement of your body and the different planes and parts of the being to that bindu, which is represented by the sa. And to get a little bit more into the raga, how the raga can be understood as this yantra, and how we can understand it in relation to the other terms that I've been bringing in here. I'm gonna describe the form image of the raga as the architectonics, which is really the essence of this raga deity. And you can realize this through contemplating the kind of the essence or the beingness of this raga deity. And it's composed of a constellation of musical phrases and the architectonics in which those phrases expand and contract. And so bringing it right back to this notion of the sa, or the center point, the bija of the, or bija in the sound form here, but the seed form of this, which can be contained in the center of the mandala. And so this is the form image, and it can be understood as the yantra. Now the second element, and that one we can realize by seeing. It corresponds to the seeing. So the second element, which is going to be the sound form, or the sound image, we have the phraseology of the raga. So it's the deployment of this architectonic, this virtual architectonic essence into becoming, and it's realized through hearing. And this can be likened to the metaphysics of the mantra. And so in a sense, this completes the idea of as a yantra in becoming, in time, perpetually being reborn, to use Devashish's phrase. I'd like to try to play and demonstrate a little bit more of how the architectonics work in ragas, so as to compose these types of geometries, these sonic architectures, if you will. This raga I'm playing is called Rag Todi, and it has, like many of the grand ragas of North Indian tradition, some very important symmetries that are built into the music that can perpetuate the music. On one of my first trips to Calcutta, my guru Shantanu said the potency of the raga is infinite, which is a phrase, an idea that I will always grapple with throughout my life, because how do you realize that, and what does that really mean? But getting deeper into the tradition, I believe that it's like the grand ragas, which are the ones that can be equal to that phrase, are the ones that have these very, very deep and quite sometimes very perfect symmetries in different places. So, for instance, try to hear how the phrases reflect each other as I geometrically transpose them from different places in the scale. And in that sense, you can see the construction of how this can start opening into a yantric seeing. Verse. Here's the exact mirror image. Okay, I just have one more section here I'd like to get to. Obviously this is something that what I'm trying to express has been in the workings in myself for 15 years. And so I'm trying to share that because I think the music does the best job. But with deeper introspection, I hope that you would, and with also musicological understanding, it would help bring out this diagram that I'm trying to share. So, this idea of revelatory seeing and hearing. My question is, what is when we can integrally experience these two together? What is the result, or how can we understand that? And I found it to be a very interesting experience that definitely goes beyond description, really. But drawing upon the aesthetic theory in India of rasa, the rasa theory, I thought this was a very interesting place to situate this question. And this is an old idea in India that was developed upon in later years by Abhinavagupta. And so what would an integral experience of rasa be? And so by cultivating an integral consciousness, which can overcome the absolute ontological duality between seeing and hearing, or seeing as revelatory knowledge of being, and hearing as revelatory knowledge of the becoming of that being. And so not having to have one or the other. And this helps us to overcome this idea of seeing, or this revelatory knowledge, as a transcendental idea or form, and a static image of being. And therefore, in the more classical image of thinking, then becoming or hearing in this sense would be a fallen representation from this image. But my question is really actually about how these two can integrally coexist simultaneously as a form of knowledge and as a form of taste. And I think that the relation between revelatory seeing and hearing can actually be expressed in those terms. And so therefore we would have the idea of an integral rasa image that has come from this practice. And so based on the discussion of the raga as a sono yantra, this could be understood as we're disappearing into that bindu of the yantra, and which is going to unbind the finite, opening us to the infinite. And so this is a psychocosmological practice and diagram that opens us to the experiencing radical infinity. And from this perspective, the Sonu ritual can act as what Banerjee describes as a crystal image, which is really that bridge or the interface between eternity and time. In the words of Banerjee, an eternal event sounds like a paradox. Events occur in time, while eternity, no time. So an eternal event is a bridge between eternity and time. In fact, it is the origin of time, a reoccurring image which structures time. It thus may be called a time image or time crystal. This is an image or idea that encapsulates the properties of eternity as an exploration in time, an idea that gives birth to an eternal exploration is an eternal event. And just to finish here in my conclusion, Sri Aurobindo gives us a metaphysics and a practice to cultivate an integral consciousness which can simultaneously know through knowledge with by identity the realms of being and becoming as integral knowledge. Therefore, an integral realization and approaching and framing raga music as a sonal ritual would be the simultaneous knowing and seeing of the ideational seed form of the raga and hearing of these virtual potentials in the becoming. I propose that this can be understood as an integral form of rasa or integral rasa image, which is the relation between darshana, seeing, and hearing. This is an intuitive knowledge understood as the suprasensible taste of the divine of the divine. I'm going to end with a quote from Dr. Banerjee, which can contextualize this in the goal of trans-individuation. Quote, modernity has brought us into a multicultural experience in which we may come across emotional responses developed in other cultures that are alien to us. A pluralized impersonal taste for life experience may equip us to take in all the tastes or rasa of the world with an equal appetite. Developing such an equal emotional response against the grain of our preferences would constitute an active equality of the emotions. This would lead to the spiritual fulfillment, to the perception of the divine at play in the world in all experiences, and allow us to live in the consciousness of divine bliss or ananda. And so we can see how within these goals and these metaphysics that we can consider raga music as having and giving rise to, giving birth to new possibilities of ethics and politics and aesthetics. Thanks. If I had time, I'd play one.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, let's take some questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or just, open your mic. Okay, John. Oh, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Wow. Okay. So all very fascinating. So what are like would be like a good introductory book for studying this?
Studying North Indian raga music in general, or studying the...
Yeah, well, I mean, this is all very deep stuff. It's like, yeah, what would be like a good starting point? Because it looks like it's, you're using images, mandala, music, and everything. So it's...
I mean, I would recommend Debashish's book, The Seven Quartets of Becoming, which doesn't deal with raga or music specifically, but it definitely deals with the larger metaphysics that I'm drawing upon, and the interpretation of the record of yoga, which was Sri Aurobindo's experimental practice in the first formulation of integral yogas. So that would be one place to start. On the musical side, I mean, what I've been speaking about is actually drawn from a larger paper that is being published in a volume of Posthumanism in India. What was the name of it again?
Critical cartography.
Critical Cartographies for Bloomsbury. Posthumanism. Yeah, and that's going to be coming out soon, and will include a lot of other very interesting papers.
Yeah, I had met, I don't know if you're familiar with the writings of Dr. Antonio de Nicolas.
Yes.
But he, I met him a while back, and when I'm hearing you talk, it's like, oh wow, it's the same, it's the same philosophy and language and everything like that. So he was always about talking about the making of images and things like that. So it's very interesting to hear you speak of that.
Yes, thank you. I'll check out Debashish. You're familiar. I'll check that out. Debashish can point me in the right direction. And yes, I didn't. A lot of my work is kind of also bringing in continental philosophy. And this paper I chose to take out the Western references I'm thinking along with. But right now, going deep in my studies with Debashish on Bergson, Henri Bergson, who is, I think, gave us a very important idea behind our concept of the image. That's also where my research is taking me.
Yeah, so definitely want to learn. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Maybe do you have like a website or something where I could look you up or your work as well?
Yeah, it's simple, jonathank.ca. And there's some music and some other art-based scholarship there as well.
Is it Kay or?
Yeah, JONATHANKAY.ca.
Okay, .ca. Okay, very cool.
You could also point out the book by O.C. Ganguly that you mentioned.
Oh, sure. The traditional one? Right, yes. Okay, so going right back to the sources, that's exactly addressing the question more clearly. So yeah, O.C. Ganguly was the musicologist that I was quoting from, and the book is called Rags and Ragims. And his interpretation of, in that early time, I believe it's around the 20s and 30s he's writing, but it's actually, I think, quite a more of a spiritual approach, psycho-spiritual approach to the music rather than the musicological approach, which is also, I mean, that would be more common in my experience of researching about ragas.
Yeah, Dr. De Nicolas, he also related it to the work of to Plato and Socrates, the allegory of the cave and everything like that. So there's definitely a connection there. I'm looking forward to studying.
Cool.
Yeah, so there's one part of the octaves in the cave and the other's outside. I'm like, how does that work?
Nice. Yeah. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Margaret. Yeah, do you want to say anything?
Oh, just, Jonathan, thank you so much. The integration between the music and the text, the explanation of Sri Aurobindo in these contexts, and obviously referencing Devashish. Thank you. Nice presentation, integral presentation.
Thanks, Margaret.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you started by talking about samsara and sannyasa, and then you brought in this yantra and mantra, and you also spoke about abhinava and rasa. So oftentimes, there's a recent critique, recent meaning, I think not that recent, but somewhat recent critique of Abhinava Gupta that says that essentially what he did is he appropriated the practices of the outside, the practices of wandering minstrels that used to be called yogis, and turned it into a kind of a courtly aesthetics. So that question remains as to how the first part of your paper connects with the second part of your paper.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I didn't develop upon that because I felt like, and he's coming from he's a Kashmiri Shaivist, so it would still be an alternative goal of becoming that I think you could argue would be part of that dialectic. And so I think that's where, for me, the integral goal of becoming then displaces the fact, well, this is either for your own liberation, which is ultimately just apersonal and outside of time and life and image in a way, or it diverts into the culture of the court. So,
Yeah, I would say that the dialectic remains through history. I mean, you can issue that critique all the way up to the present, and even more so today than ever before, because the two have been totally sundered in modernity, the outside and the inside. So it's, in a way, Plato's caves, the cave on the outside and the inside of the cave, it goes back. So the question is, how do we create a people to come? I think that becomes your project in the sense of, as you started, the whole issue of samsara and sannyasa and the resolution of the dialectic in terms of, the inside and the outside, the image and the text, or the image and the performance.
and then what about, it seems to me also that the method, the immanent hermeneutic, is not just a method of scholarship.
Yeah.
It's a psychocosmological, which is individual and collective too. And I think that's where this quote at the end is very thinking that as obviously part of this method in which we have shared aspirations and shared goals, yet are not able to be captured and then deployed by the mind, but to be part of this kind of an affective community, right? To quote Gandhi, but
Yeah, so this is too short a paper to bring it out, but I guess that would be the
yes.
kind of overarching, unifying theme.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much
Thanks.
for your conversation. So do we want to take one more question, or is okay to end here? If anyone wants to have any questions?
Hi, yes.
Oh, maybe.
Hey, Jonathan. Anshul here. Thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. I really enjoyed it, especially, interspersed with the pieces that you were playing. They were very evocative. I have a question regarding raga music and, how in raga music, each raga is supposed to be played during a certain time of the day, and there is this relation between the time of the day and raga. And so I was wondering about what is the relation with with the raga and time in terms of maybe in a certain Bergsonian sense of duration, and how do you see that vis-a-vis Shruti and Drishti? Does it playing a particular raga in that particular time, is it more conducive to tuning into that space of Shruti or Drishti, or yeah, what has been your experience vis-a-vis that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry. So yeah, I think that's the main line, the main tradition line that I learned is that is, yes, you accept that that's true. And this has been a tradition that's being carried on for centuries, and there's a reason for it. But when you ask people, well, why do we do this? You get either some answers that are different than each other, you get different answers, a whole multiplicity of answers, and then you get other people that say, I don't know, I just do it because that's what the tradition told me to do. But there is a lot of also stories about great maestros having experiences where it's kind of like the sonic ritual opens them, and it's really they'll have transpersonal experiences in which the music and the performer and the audience and nature all kind of the aesthetic rasa happens. So for me, as an outsider initially coming to this music, I said, well, why would I just accept that? Is it absolutely true? Is this the truth that in North India this is the way it is? So I took it more as an invitation. And as I was building myself and rebuilding myself through engaging with not only the musical practice of raga music, but the whole psychocosmological sadhana of the music, which is not predefined, but is really an invitation to contemplate, to meditate, and to try to build conditions of experience in which something like this can happen. And so I found myself very compelled at times to not just accept that this raga is for this time of day, but actually to go into nature at that time and play the music, or to engage with the kind of myths, the mythos of the ragas. Like, for instance, there's a morning raga called Bhairav, and my guru described it. Again, this is just one of many different ways to describe raga. He's describing the third note of the raga as when the sun comes over the horizon for the first time, and you can just see the first ray of light. So when you reach that note, that's that feeling, So what's that experience like? Well, you have to play that raga and go in and wait for the sun to rise. And I found myself in Darjeeling at the top of, I think it's called Tiger Hill, one of the lookout points. And we arrived very early, so I started singing a Drupad Alap. And it was about 20 minutes, but I wasn't getting to that note until I saw the first ray of light. And when that first ray of light came, I sang the God, and I tried to open myself to the possibilities of an experience, and that was actually one that was very profound. And so I took it as an invitation, and I was open to building myself accordingly. And some myths from the tradition really I've internalized them, and they've become very alive. They've become part of the machine, the yantric machine, on a psychocosmological level. And other ones, maybe I haven't as much, but I think this is where there's no absolute truth in that. It's a matter of, do you build yourself and experience this, and what is your experience of it? And so that's where I think that my engagement with the tradition is not just to accept it as this is the truth, and I have to accept that and not question it, but it's really about a matter of embedding yourself within it and then trying to realize it for yourself. And sometimes my realizations correspond very deeply with what I had directly learned from the tradition, and sometimes it's a little bit unique because I live in a unique time and place from when these myths are coming. So that's how
That's beautiful. That's beautifully put. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that experience on Tiger Hill. And yeah, it's beautiful how you've been able to approach this so integrally. It's remarkable. Thank you.